Evening all on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube. I'll just give it a few seconds before starting. Turn off my Java updater. Okay. So I thought this week we could carry on logically from last week and carry on looking at the Taimanov Fischer match. Okay, so the Taimanov Fischer match, Fischer was leading 4-0, and it's like best of 10 these matches, these quarterfinal matches. And just so you get a grip on the format, so a quarterfinal match, there's 3 other of these quarterfinals being played at the same time in different parts of the world. So while Fischer and Taimanov were meeting in Vancouver, in Canada, I believe, so we have also the Expo champion Tigran Petrosian was playing Hubner in West Germany. They were playing their match in Seville, Spain. Korchnoi, representing Russia, was playing his countryman Geller in Moscow. And the other one, Bent Larsen of Denmark, was playing Wolfgang Ullmann of East Germany. And they were playing in Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. So these are the 3 matches were being played out at the same time. Just for you to know, these quarterfinal... so the eventual winners would meet Boris Spassky. So we're at the 4-0 stage. So in game 5, let's see what happens. So Taimanov playing white against Fischer. We're going to flip the board, and it starts with d4, and Fischer sticks with his King's Indian defense, knight f6. Maybe it should be noted, in one of the other matches, Korchnoi was destroying the King's Indian defense in the Korchnoi match. That was helping Korchnoi eventually beat Geller, but Fischer never got to play Korchnoi. That would have been a very, very interesting match of strengths, because Korchnoi has this reputation of being very, very strong against the King's Indian defence. It would have been very interesting, that sort of match. But anyway, so c4 g6, knight c3, but actually we have a surprise here. Fischer doesn't play the King's Indian. He plays the Grunfeld, d5, a surprise, d5. Now, white plays bishop g5. This is the 4th most common move to play here, and we have this attacking move, knight e4, hitting the bishop. It's Fury. Bishop goes back, and now Fischer took on c3, takes. And I've had this with white, I think, something similar to this against an IM a few years back, and it's an interesting position because black actually can be greedy here, taking on c4, and this is actually the main move. Seemingly a greedy move, taking on c4. The alternative is not so popular, bishop g7. And you might wonder, well, what's the idea if white can regain this pawn? Black gets some time here and play on the light squares by taking here. He's opened up the d5 square. These light squares are potentially quite vulnerable. e3, and yeah, it looks kind of materialistic to simply protect the pawn, but it's possible. Bishop e6. And you might wonder, hold on a sec, why didn't white play e4? This hasn't got a great usage. Let's put on a Kibitzer here just to get an insight into this, just for those interested. e4. Yes, perhaps black can play just b5 here. This seems as though black might be okay in this position. Not too bad anyway in that position. So anyway, e3, bishop e6. Fischer just hangs on to the pawn. The slight downside of this is b7 and this file here. So white uses that rook b1, B6. So this bishop's a bit inhibited. Can white get back the pawn that easily? Not so easy, really. You might think the check, but actually on the check c6, and if we ever play bishop takes c4, then a nasty surprise in b5. So it's not so easy to get that pawn back. For the moment, white plays bishop e2, and we have a really unusual looking move, which is hardly played nowadays. It's a shocking looking move from Fischer, almost like computer-like move. I wouldn't have really thought about it that much. I don't know if it's some sort of misprint. No, it can't be a misprint. But I wonder if you can guess. Black to play, it's a sort of outrageous move. What would you think black plays in this position? If I give you 20 seconds, some of you that are here. So black to play, it looks a little bit crazy. Actually, I'm gonna reserve some questions for later when this. Okay, so I'll show you now. I'm just going to show you. It's just a weird looking opening move. Bishop h6. I know it's looking weird to me anyway. To play the bishop here, I guess this is a rock solid structure in the center, so the bishop looks a bit maybe pointless on g7 anyway, but it's interesting. Knight f3 was played. c6 now. Knight e5, so wanting to get the pawn back, not bothering to castle here. Maybe if castles, black might consider f6 to deprive the e5 square, and the bishop looks to be more useful on that diagonal than it would be here, I guess. Maybe there's some evidence for the rationale there. But anyway, so knight e5, and the bishop now actually drops back in this position. So the white doesn't really want the pawns doubled here, as well as black clinging onto the pawn. Well, not under the current circumstances, but he does play f4. So in this position we have bishop d5, looking at this pawn. White castle's protecting the pawn, and now Fischer wants to give the pawn back. Well, he can't do much else, I think, here. It's starting to be too dangerous. If he tries to cling on to this c4 pawn, I think he's really asking for trouble. He didn't play this. He played knight d7, getting on with development and not having any bad pieces, really. If he plays this, then bishop f3, and white is going to be playing e4, and this looks unpleasant. You don't really want this position with the c6 issue. For example, like this, it starts to look horrible for black. Yeah, white will be getting a big advantage. You don't want this sort of thing. This would be like crushing. So no, Fischer's going to give back the pawn and not going to have too many bad pieces or any other major issue. He plays knight d7. So white is taking time to take this c4 pawn now. And plays knight takes c4. So it's okay for white. He's got his pawn back. Black castles. And we have here a slight, you could consider this a slight structural issue, or can it be used as a battering ram? a4. So a5 to try and dissolve that pawn and put pressure on the b file. Okay, so Fischer reacts now with c5. What does c5 do? Well, it gives the queen, I mean, if cd is useful, then queen c7, looking at c3 later, or rook c8. White doesn't want to capture away from the center. There's some pressure put on this seemingly solid structure in the center. Knight d5 was played. White actually hasn't committed that many crimes on the chessboard here. He's still okay, but it's the situation of the match which is really pressing on his mind as well. It's not just the position. He's 4-0 down in this match and needs to win this game, really. I mean, it's the best of 10. If Fischer draws his way to victory, he only needs a few more draws and he'd be winning the match. If he gets to like 5.5, then he's won the match. So anyway, White really wants to win this. Knight e5, knight takes. White now plays d takes e5, which might be the slightly better way of taking this. That central d file can be put under pressure soon, and White has some manoeuvring to do to use that d file, but it's possible. White is immediately threatening here. Bishop takes e7, by the way, because of queen takes, and queen takes d5. So Fischer reacts to this bishop takes e7 by playing f6. But now we have rook b2, and the rook threatens to pin this bishop on d5. So this is the next major threat to deal with. Rook d2, bishop e6. But rook d2 anyway, queen c7. And White really wants to get into this infiltration square, but it's this guardian that needs to be removed, this e6 guardian of that entry point. And we see this move bishop g4, which is a very good move. And White persists in having a small advantage in this position. And he's threatening check. There's no time to do anything like rook d8 here. This bishop takes e6 check needs to be parried. We see queen c8. Okay, and now the infiltration actually doesn't mean that much here. If White did take and takes here, I think this is easily parryable, this position. Black could play this, maybe even, and it's the pressure on these two pawns, and the queen's quite well placed here. So this carries only an advantage for Black, really. So the infiltration, yes, seemingly was tempting, but it's fine in this position. So White actually plays bishop f3, keeping some pressure up. Rook b8, queen e2. So there's some light square pressure with queen b5 maybe coming up. Also maybe e4 to try and do something with these pawns. Rook d8. White reinforces that d file. A couple of rooks come off. But queen takes d2, marking authority on the d file for the moment. And you might think, well, Black can't ever really take here because of the e7 pawn. So let's have a look. If he did take, I think just bishop takes e7, and this is good for White. Say something like this, bishop d6. This is good for White. So Fischer actually plays queen e8. But actually after queen e8, he's approaching equality. White has to play very carefully here because Black hasn't got too many weaknesses. E takes f was played. E takes f6. E takes f6. Queen d6 and infiltration to d6. It looks a little bit scary. And White with this might be threatening something like bishop c6 hitting the queen. And that might start to be unpleasant because we're also looking at the rook here. So Fischer reacts with rook c8, parrying that idea. a5, trying to wreck Black's structure. Kind of minority attack against this structure. Minority of pawns attacking majority of pawns to try and inflict structural damage. Fischer kicks the queen, bishop f8 back. And now we see bishop e7 protecting the f6 pawn, which was for a moment there unprotected. Bishop d5. The light squares are a bit weak for Black, but queen f7. Black takes now, and after takes, there's some pressure on e3. Queen d7, and a great move here from Fischer. And actually Black seems to have got a tiny advantage out of all this, believe it or not, from this position. He plays a lovely move here, and what would you play here? It's a lovely move, and it does maintain a small advantage. It's maybe one you wouldn't consider. I'll give you a moment to think about this. Black to play, if I give you 20 seconds here. So it seems as though white's finally got that infiltration to d7. So how much is it worth, this infiltration to d7? What would you say? What can black do in reaction to queen d7 here, which is strong? Any ideas? If I give you 20 seconds. Okay, now it's not actually queen takes e3 check. This is a bad idea after bishop f2, because we've got the rook hanging. That loses instantly. By the way, if you're on Play Chess, please hide the notation tab. Go onto another tab, not the notation tab, for these guess the moves. He didn't play rook c6. That's interesting. It might be one of the better moves, rook c6. After queen takes. White still might be okay here. Takes bishop f2 is strong, because of something like this, with e7 being a problem. But black doesn't have to take on e3 here if this had happened. Takes. This is still okay for white, this position. But there's an even stronger move for black than rook c6 in the form of king f7. The king comes to the rescue. And the king would conveniently hold the d7 square on takes. The king's nice in the centre, if that had happened. And black's got a pawn majority over here. So, yeah, it puts white under pressure, this move, king f7. We see queen takes a7. But now, okay, again, I think it's not accurate to play queen takes e3 just yet. If we see if queen takes e3 is played bishop f2. And again, there's a problem with this rook e1. This pin is very dangerous on the 7th rank. So say queen takes here. And there's also another problem here, a takes b as well. So this is no good, really. And actually, in the light of a takes b, Fischer plays b takes, dissolving that, removing that potentially dangerous passed pawn. He plays that. Still looking at this pawn. Now this really is on. White plays e4. And the idea is this pin, of course. If queen takes e4, rook e1, we've got this lovely tactical pin and win, and there's no checks for black. So that would be the end of black here. Because if rook a8, we will maintain the pin, and that's end of game, basically. So no, that's not possible. Queen takes e4. We see queen c6 from Fischer. And there's an idea here of rook a8. And maybe this pawn be herding up. White has to react quickly. He plays rook d7, but he's actually slightly worse here technically now. So attacking e7. And now queen takes e4 is safe enough here to play, protecting the bishop. And there's also some other ideas for black now, like g5, looking at that pressure potentially. So white plays h3. And okay, let's see this position. After h3, I don't think g5 is any good here. I mean, this should be okay after bishop f2. In this particular position, g5 is no good. But Fischer plays a4 This is probably one of the better moves. So this pawn is quite a decoy, potentially. A4. Now we see bishop f2. Black wants to get out of this pin now. This is annoying, this stuff, potentially. If he doesn't, well, let's see this position. If Fischer had played a3 here, didn't, then maybe this is possible. Takes, queen takes, a2, queen to a7. It's very dangerous, but maybe it's possible that white holds on. But anyway, Fischer didn't do a3. Yeah, he doesn't need to do something like that. He does king f8, just unpinning, so really protecting this pawn a bit more. And we see c4 now. Okay, so breaking that protection. Among other things, so white's got various tries here. Fischer now plays a3, so distracting the queen to a3 now, because otherwise rook a8 and this pawn is really dangerous. So why is he doing this? Queen takes. Well, his rook gets activated now with rook a8, so the queen has to defend a1. And okay, this position, what's going on here? It looks tempting just to take on f4 or c4. Very interesting. Would you take on f4 or c4 here? Fischer didn't play either of these moves. If queen takes f4, in fact, this wouldn't be a good idea. This is not a game continuation. It might be tempting to play queen takes f4, but guess what white has here? Actually, there's a crushing tactic in this variation. White to play and win, I would say. Can you see a white to play and win here if this had been played? 20 seconds, little tactical test here. Any ideas? In this variation, I'm going to show you. White would be winning this with rook takes e7. There's a loose piece here to be picked up with double attack. So say here, queen b7 check. So black's got to be careful. And the same with, I think the same story with rook, queen takes c4. Let's just check. Just rook takes is the same story. So Fischer avoids that. He plays actually another great move, and if you look at this position, his queen's actually beautifully centralized right now in principle, and his rook is actually wonderfully active. So these two pieces are actually quite well placed, but yeah, white has got this potentially annoying rook to make use of somehow. Fischer plays king e8, using his king again to kick the rook away. Queen b5, and the king drops back. Bit of that seems a bit of a pointless exercise, or is it? The rook goes back now to d1, and with that, it is now safe to play queen takes f4. But white is gaining his pawn back, so we're 3 pawns each, but white's got this passed pawn. Bishop takes c5, queen takes c5 check, king g7. Is it a big deal? Well, white should be able to force a draw in various ways in this position. Rook f1 is actually a reasonable move as well to try and get a draw at least. We see queen e4. I mean, black isn't significantly better or anything. Check. After king h6 was played, well, this is the safest option for Fischer. If he plays king h8, actually, then, okay, in this position, this is starting to be a bit dangerous, maybe with c5 and c6. This king's sort of out of the action, but there's also an issue maybe with rook d1 as well, and c5 or rook d7. So Fischer wisely puts his king on h6 here. It's actually safer to put the king on h6. And not to be afraid of simplification with queen f4, because he's already 4 points up in the match. But yeah, queen f4 here might not be the easiest way to get a draw. If white wants to draw here, rook f4, and in this position, for example, check, oops, check, here, queen e3, check, check, and white could get a draw by force, basically. So that's why forcefully getting a draw, rook f4 would seem to be enough for quality if he wanted. Or queen g3, say. Let's have a look at this. Queen takes, rook takes. And, you know, there's enough checks going around here. It's difficult for black to avoid a draw, really. But, yeah, in the game, a remarkable move was played, which some writers have described the heat of the battle getting to Fischer's opponents. So engine evaluation gives at least 3 moves which are dead equal. 4 moves: rook f4, queen g3, queen d6. 3 moves. Others might be inferior after that, but the move played was extremely inferior. White's playing blunder. So what is a horrific blunder for for white to play in this position? White's play and blunder. Can you guess? If I give you 20 seconds, what was played here? And remember, you're bound to lose lots of games in chess, not through being checkmated, but through losing material. And one of the most statistically important ways of losing material or gaining material will be loose pieces. And in connection with loose pieces is the double attack to exploit loose pieces. So what sort of blunder creates a loose piece here? You can consider the creation of a loose piece as offering what I call a weakness of the last move. A weakness of the last move is not anything to do with grand plans in chess. It's the hand-to-hand battles we get in most of our games. These are not long strategic plans. These are losing tactical battles. The weakness of the last move is something the opponent does that you can immediately exploit. Yes, Taimanov probably frustrated already, being 4-0 down. A great player who's beaten the likes of Tal and Karpov and other champions played rook takes f6. So this is a loose piece. As I say, statistically, loose pieces is a great way of losing material. Here there's a slight added subtlety to it. How does black actually win material here? I hope you can see the 2-move combination to win material. Black's plan win material. How? If I give you 20 seconds. Okay. Queen d4 is the double attack, which results in a terrible pin situation. If the king moves, then we just take on f6, right? So we have this terrible pin, and now rook a1 check, forcing the king away from the rook. And the game ends here. White resigned. Move 47, White resigns. So Fischer's now 5-0 up. So 5-0 up. He just needs a draw to win the match. It's supposed to be the best of 10. So he's 5-0 up. Let's review this game again. Let's see some points to it. So taking, it causes issues for White taking this pawn and trying to hold on to it. I know I've played the White side of this. It's not that pleasant when Black plays bishop e6. In live book, e3 is the most popular move. There's only one game with e4. I don't think this is meant to be that good because of b5 or something else maybe. So e3 is, White had a good game, let's face it, for a while. White had a good game. This looks just odd, like a computer move, let's face it. Strange. But if you consider White's maybe aiming to do this, then maybe this is a nice option without blocking in the bishop. c6, but once knight e5 is definitely played, now the bishop drops back. So Fischer's avoided the f6 move, basically. f4, and he has good pieces. There's no bad pieces for Black at this stage. All his pieces are quite good. He's giving the pawn back, but he's got no problems out of the opening. White has a plan of using the d file and threatening bishop takes e7. That was parried here now with f6. White uses the d file and tries to get in on d7. So he tries to get in on d7, but there's a resourceful move for Fischer which keeps Black well in the game coming up. After taking here, rook c8 stopping White's threat bishop c6, because this infiltration means something. There's some tactical pressure here. a5 dissolving that weakness, trying to weaken this structure. Fischer takes time to put the bishop on e7 here. This transfer to e7 to keep hold of f6 and hold c5 a bit longer. So he has to protect f6. White weakens those light squares. But there's a point here, key move, king f7, fantastic little move. With the queen holding the rook. Putting pressure on e3. What does White do here to maintain the advantage? He took on a7. I wonder if king f2, is that ridiculous? Maybe we can take there. So anyway, queen takes a7. Took here. Very good, because if queen takes e3, bishop f2 and rook e1 would backfire on Black. Tactical precision. e4 again, queen takes e4, rook e1, backfiring on Black. We see queen c6, Black's rook is getting active on the a file if a5 drops. Rook d7. At this point, well, this is a mistake by the way, because of rook takes e7 check here, overloaded. Sorry, e7's dropping there. Pardon me. Queen takes e4, h3, a4. We saw this continuation. King f8 unpinning. c4, a3, queen takes. And now this rook got active on that a file. But yeah, it was a position coming up where it was still okay for White. It was still okay here, and he had three ways to draw the position. Fischer, created this little trap. Well, maybe he didn't expect his opponent to go in for it. I mean, I think the trap works here as well. King h8, I think here, again, it works here in this position. Actually, no, it doesn't work as well here, to be fair. If check, and it doesn't work in the same way, if check here, queen takes, this isn't losing. We've got queen e5 check. And actually it's equal. But it works in a slightly different way, the same sort of mechanism, because we have rook f8 in this position. Queen g3 and zugzwang. This is zugzwang. King g7, zugzwang. This is fascinating. Sorry. This is fascinating. Or is it? Is it zugzwang? Because if king f1 we have queen d1. If queen c7, can we maintain the pressure? King here, queen here. Here. What does white do? White's running out of moves. End of game. So yeah, it did seem to work in that variation as well, the trap. In a slightly different way. King h8 also sets the trap in a slightly different way here. That's fascinating. Little tactical trivia. But king h6, yeah, is much clearer. And let's actually just have a look at it diametric from the other point of view of rook f8 here. This is also strong as well, rook f8 in this position. For the same sort of zugzwang effect, we can have a zugzwang here with what we've just looked at. It's the same thing as what we've just looked at, because white's running out of moves. He can throw this away. I don't think that helps. King h8. If he loses that pawn, queen takes. It's still losing. If king f1 to try and wriggle out, check, check, and white's king actually gets mated instead of losing the rook. So yeah, it's fascinating. The trap works in the other variation as well. But yeah, it wasn't. I don't think it was really a trap or anything. He was just wanting a draw. He gets one step closer to winning the match. But it's a bonus that he won the game. Yeah, rook takes f6, just losing immediately. Sorry, move the c pawn from Devon Butler. You think there's something wrong with the analysis? Okay, all right, move the c pawn. Okay, hold on, let's have a look at this. King h8. Check. Rook f8. Queen g3. King g7. I don't think moving the c pawn helps here. We just take it. And even if king f1 to try and get out, it's just the king gets slaughtered. It's a forced mate in 8 apparently after check, check. It's a forced mate, this position, in 5 now. So yeah, it doesn't help. That's a forced mate. So yeah, it is a terrible thing. This loose piece. It's what it creates. It creates this loose. It creates this pin actually as well. So which is also a kind of weakness to be exploited. Tapped into this nasty pin in various ways. In this position, it's rook a1. In the other one, it would be rook f8. All right, I think that's enough of that one. Okay. Let's go on to the 6th game. So Fischer was white in this game 6. So could he close the match out? So he just needs a draw actually, I think. So it's best of 10. He just needs to draw this. Unless he's going to lose all the rest of his games, the match is virtually over. Okay, so Fischer as white plays e4. We have a Sicilian, knight f3, knight c6. And we have open Sicilian, e6, knight b5. d6, bishop f4, e5, bishop drops back. There's a lot of games from this position. Bishop g5, bishop e6. This one to c3, a6. White takes on f6. G takes. It looks a bit like a Sicilian Sveshnikov, a little bit, but black is not obliged to play b5 or anything. b5 is a popular, not that popular, only 2 games in line, but this is quite an unusual position actually. d5 apparently is popular here. In fact, d5 or f5 is mentioned by the engines here. Not knight d4. Interesting. Knight d4 was played. Okay, so we see knight c4, f5, trying to get control of that d5 square. E takes, and black takes with the knight. If black does take with the bishop, you might think that's dangerous because of c2, yeah. But white can do various things. Probably best is knight e3, elegantly protecting and hitting the bishop. So black didn't bother with that. Knight takes f5, and he wants to play potentially d5 if that's tactically possible to play d5. Now a routine move from white would be, say, bishop e2, and I think actually if Fischer had played bishop e2, I think we can appreciate his genius. Actually, he didn't play this. If he had played this, d5, if knight takes, d4, and actually we're in big trouble. We've got terrible tactics with a loose piece here. We're dropping a piece, aren't we? Check, and we're dropping a piece. Yeah, it's horrible. And if the knight's not taking on e5, then it's in big trouble. Knight e3, d4. So white has to tread very carefully here. Bishop e2 looks like a casual move. No, Fischer plays bishop d3. Bishop d3. Now, this is vastly different. If d5 here, then again taking on e5 is bad. If we take on e5, it's bad for slightly different reasons. Knight h4. If castles, queen g5 again, the loose piece double attack is nasty. Black ends up a lot better. But no, bishop d3 has a certain design to it that here actually we can play bishop takes f5. And on takes, we can take here. Okay, that's fine. So bishop d3, very good move. Move 14. Rook c8. And now we see white giving up the light square bishop voluntarily. Rook takes c4 was played. I think this might be playable as well. Bishop takes knight e3. This is playable as well. But rook takes c4. Bishop takes e6. It looks as though black's got a herd of pawns in the centre here. Is the dark square bishop going to be quite useful against the knight? Is this g-file going to be useful? Why isn't this check tempting? White played queen e2, actually. If he plays the check, let's have a look. I think it's fairly harmless here. Or is it? King d7. I think it's okay, actually, for white. This position apparently is okay for white. He could have played the check. He played queen e2, though. So rook d4. Which stops queenside castling. Now the check here I don't think is as significant. King d7, and black's going to be fine later with moves like queen f6 and rook g8. So no, white castles here. Queen g5. And it looks as though, you know, black's got a lovely g-file in principle, but he's probably demoralised so far in this match. He's like on the precipice of losing the match, though. Yeah, he needs an aggressive position with black. Is this it? Is this the aggressive position? Rook ad1. The thing is, something crude like this, I think we just play g3 and say, so what? So we see black playing queen f5. Okay, rook takes d4, e takes, knight e4, ties down the bishop to d6 for a moment. Is it tempting to kick the knight? Not really. Bishop e7 was played. If he tries to kick the knight, knight just drops back there. It's quite snug. And we've got pressure potentially on these centre pawns down the e-file. So yeah, bishop e7 was played. Rook d1. Queen e5. Queen d3. Hitting d4. Black now plays rook f8 in response to this. So white takes this d pawn. This might not be technically the best move here, funny enough. Engine's suggestion is g3, keeping the rook out of things like f4 here. g3, because this pawn, is it going anywhere? It's an interesting position anyway. Maybe d5 is coming up, and it's interesting. But yeah, Fischer went for queen takes d4. He just needs a draw anyway. So queen takes, rook takes. So for the moment, white's a pawn up. But after d5, we see some danger with bishop c5 and this f2 pawn. Knight c3, bishop c5. Rook d2. Rook f4. Now there's some nasty things like bishop b4 going on. Nasty pin here, and d4 would be dangerous. g3. Rook c4. So still black is threatening. Now bishop b4. He's got a certain compensation for being a pawn down here. He's got more active rook. He's got the centre pawns. He's got the dark square bishop pointing at f2 and also bishop b4. Is it enough? Knight e2, getting out of the way of bishop b4. Rook activity is felt. Rook a4. Pawn moves. King d7. King g2. White's better. He's a pawn up here. b5. c3, stopping this b4. a5, trying to go for this b4. Okay, how dangerous is this b4? Probably not very. Knight d4. Looking at that, b4. Knight b3. Bishop moves. A takes. A takes. And this is convenient. c4. What's this rook doing here? It hasn't even got this. This knight's on a1. Got pressure on the centre. King comes to c6. White's just better here. He could do various things actually. He can play c takes and it would still be better. It's a good position for white. Plays maybe an even stronger move, c5. So if takes, there's rook c2 winning that piece. There's no rook a5 here. So the bishop goes to c7. And it's bad. It's bad news, this position. Knight d4 check is nasty. If takes here, this gets nasty for black. Takes, takes, rook takes d5, and this ending is very good for white. For example, well, he's got 3-1, so that's no good for black. It's pretty bad position now after knight d4. So the king actually steps back. Black might be interested in bishop e5. That's taken out with f4 removed. E5, but now we see check, king c8, knight b5, looking at d5, taking on d5, then things like rook d7. Rook a2, trying to tie down the rook, but now we've got a running pass pawn here, potentially f5. If black had played, well, let's see, if black in this position had played e takes, taking here is good. We're going to be playing rook d7 after. We're going to be taking this, and it's just very nasty, if nothing else. So, rook a2, f5, bishop d8, trying to stop this pawn. Rook takes d5. Black's just falling to bits, though. He does take on b2, but here, I think he resigns, or German or something resigns. It's over. White can win quite easily this position after moving the king. For example, let's have a look. Rook c2. There's check, which wins a piece. For example, here, check. Here, takes. This position is winning. f6. We're queening this pawn. So that's pretty hopeless, this final position after king h3, say. Rook c2 doesn't help. White is threatening various things, but actually this check and this rook d7 is one of the main things to get this f pawn going. If we have rook a2 to stop the check, then white has very strong moves here. Maybe rook d7 is one of them. To play rook b7 and knight d6, that's an idea. So say b3, we have rook b7, threatening knight d6. Checkmate. So it's horrible. It's a horrible final position. I think I'm convincing you, but let me see. Do you think it's lost for black? Any ideas for black? You want me to test that? Have a look at this position. Black resigns without waiting, I think, for king h3, but it looks lost. We've got a few trump cards here. We've got access to d7. Got this potentially dangerous pawn here. Even c7 looks good. Even this position might be winning. Yeah. So okay, yeah. Let's have a quick look at this game. Again, just quickly, briefly. So white has to play very precisely not to suffer in the centre too much, and he did. So he played bishop d3 here. In fact, this line isn't a popular approach for white, according to Livebook. It seems, I don't know. This is slightly unusual, knight d4. Apparently d5 is played a lot, and we have this sort of position. There's a few games here. It's crazy stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. The game continuation, quite unusual. With knight d4, that's quite an unusual move. So this f5 took bishop d3, and yeah, it looks as though black had active pieces, but the centre, that d4 pawn was fragile, and you might think, well, couldn't he have made more efforts to defend d4 in a slightly different way? If he plays something like e5, for example, actually there's rook takes d4 here. So if takes, we've got knight takes d6. So it wasn't that easy to defend d4. Helps explain a bit more Queen e5. And it's not easy to defend d4 here. I mean, bishop f6, actually here there's a crushing move in f4. So if takes, we have rook f1. So again, it wasn't easy to try and defend d4 in these ways. So this rook f8 was a very resourceful move in some respect, giving up d4, try and get this bishop on this diagonal. I mean, if we just hang on, look at this bishop f6 for a moment. Again, f4. If queen f5, we've got knight takes d6. It's crushing. Alright, so yeah, so we see rook f8, this idea of sacking the pawn, but white is slightly better. It seems, if he can weather the storm. So black potentially using bishop b4 to exert more pressure here. g3, you have this one. Knight e2 getting out of that potential pin and going to be using this d4 square. Yeah, and it seems, yeah, the king is actually in a bad spot for this latest c4, as we saw. You might wonder, hold on, why did the king go there? I'm not sure it helps in any way to do this. White's just better here. Apparently move like this. Rook d3. White's going to be just better anyway. This position. He's a pawn up. He's a pawn up. Black's pawns are pretty fixed. There's not much compensation going on. In fact, any sort of try and counterplay, maybe we can just use this, rook b3. So yeah, I think it wasn't a great position, but king d7 looks silly in retrospect. Why did the king go on this d file? But anyway, so it seems white was better, and this position is just horrible for black. c5 was probably the strongest move in the position, better than cd, although that's horrible for black as well. If we have this continuation, apparently this is pretty good. We've always got this f pawn in this position as a danger, and this pawn doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But anyway, c5 was even stronger. This was really good, knight d4, and then we have both this one and this one as danger pawns emerging. Okay, and yeah, it's hopeless after any move. So black resigned. So Fischer won his semi-final quarterfinal, crushingly 6-0, best of 10 games. So as I say, the other three, they weren't so convincing. What was going on in the other matches? Larsen beats Ullman 5.5, 3.5. In Moscow, Korchnoi beat Geller 5.5, 2.5. The close one was actually yeah, the Petrosian-Ullman match. Petrosian-Ullman? Sorry, hold on a sec. No, Larsen beat Ullman. Petrosian was playing Hubner. There was some drama in that match, and I wanted to show you the Hubner game actually. It is on the channel. Who would like to see, because the Petrosian-Hubner quarterfinal match was decided on one game. Apparently he left crying actually. I don't know if you've seen that game. When Hubner, he might have had a good position and he blundered and he lost, and he was really upset about it. Hubner was 22 years old. He believed his chances were nil, but they weren't. Petrosian was apparently not disturbed by all the noise in the streets or whatever, and there was this very critical game. In the 7th game, Hubner overlooked a winning move, became demoralised, burst into tears, withdrew from the match and flew home to Germany. So that was happening. Remember, this is a quarter-final match. So these other quarter-finals are actually much closer affairs in terms of points. But that was like the closest match. So Fischer's was crushing, and it sent a message to the Russians. You know, he's a real danger man, crushing Taimanov 6-0. So so Fischer's next opponent would be Bent Larsen. And we can carry on looking at Fischer's road to the World Championship match, next week. So we're going to start looking at the Fischer against Larsen match next week. So that's the quarterfinals. It's a very, very exciting system. So the winner of these quarterfinals would meet Spassky for the 1972 match. So we're going to look at Larsen next week. I hope you tune in. So have a good week. Enjoy your chess. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.